Previously on Black and White. Al Gore has people all over the world scared about the planet's future. He's got the world sacrificing and going green. Everyone is expected to sacrifice. Everyone except Al Gore. Some of you may remember last year Gore was busted using 20 times as much power for his home as the average American family uses in a year. It would appear Al Gore hasn't ramped things down. In the years since Al Gore took steps to make his home more energy efficient, the former vice president's home energy has surged more than 10%, according to the Tennessee Center for Policy Research. A man's commitment to his beliefs is best measured by what he does behind the closed doors of his home. Al Gore is a hypocrite and a fraud when it comes to his commitment to the environment, judging by his home energy consumption. In the past year, Gore's home burned through 213,210 kilowatt hours of electricity, enough to power 232 average American households for a month. Hypocrisy, thy name is Gore.
I am sick and tired of people who say that if you debate and you disagree with this administration, somehow you're not patriotic, and we should stand up and say, we are Americans and we have a right to debate and disagree with any administration.
I'm not sure who to believe with this whole Gloucester high school girls plan to get pregnant together thing, but one thing's for sure, there are very few acting like adults here. We have 17 young girls, all under the age of 16, getting pregnant fairly close together. With some, it's not that big a deal because in Massachusetts, the age of consent is 16. I say it's not that big a deal only because with those 16-year-olds, statutory rape is not applicable here. It is a big deal because as happy as some of these girls reportedly were because they did get knocked up, their lives, as well as those around them, are screwed. These young girls must think having babies is a lot of fun. Yes, they're cute, but as many of us adults know, raising babies that turn into toddlers, that turn into young children, that turn into teenagers are one of those aspects of life that turn your hair gray. What's also unfortunate is how comfortable we as a society make it for young girls to have babies before they're legally allowed to drive. Gloucester High School has daycare centers for the babies of their students. Hardly the right message when we're all trying to tell young teens that screwing around has adverse consequences on their lives, despite the ongoing conversation the community of Gloucester will have in the coming weeks and months. The removal of these daycare centers will be off the table. When we were growing up, there was no talk of school staff giving out contraceptives to students without parental permission. There were no daycare centers in schools to support those who strayed. Getting pregnant was taboo. I personally know of no students who got pregnant during my 12 years of grade school. It just wasn't done. Why? Because there was the fear and loathing. It was well known that a boy getting a girl pregnant would be yanked out of school to get a job to support that mother and baby. That boy was also said to be at physical risk from both his and the girl's father. A girl who got pregnant would be yanked out of school to take care of that baby. There were no support mechanisms in the schools. You got pregnant, your life, as you hoped it would be, was over. That was enough for most of us not to do something we knew was wrong. In listening to the adults in the equation, I can understand why the teen girls and boys are so screwed up. During a Monday, June 23rd press conference, the mayor of Gloucester sought to clear up the controversy if a pact, initially reported by Time magazine, between the 17 had indeed been made.
We have no evidence from people who work in the schools and who work with these children that there was a pact.
Maybe she missed something, but when there are reports of young girls being bummed out after several visits to the school's health facilities at not being pregnant, that should have raised as much of a red flag as having some of those girls being elated and high-fiving each other upon receiving news of the more desired result. The original mention of a pact was given to Time magazine by Gloucester High School principal Joseph Sullivan, who has apparently dropped off the planet since his original interview where he said the girls made a pact to get pregnant and raise their babies together. Mayor Kirk, when asked about the conflicts in stories by city and school officials and Sullivan, she responded that
he was foggy in his memory of how he heard about the information. When we pressed him for specifics about who told him, when was he told, his memory failed.
Here we have the biggest story to hit Gloucester since the perfect storm, and a principal player, pardon the pun, is truant. Public school districts are notorious for putting their best faces forward as they are in need of students, revenue, to stay fiscally afloat. Negative incidents are swept under the rug whenever possible. That said, you have a principal here who says there was a pact of young girls getting pregnant who is now unavailable for comment, and a group of local politicians who claim the agreement never happened. If that's the case, someone's not telling the truth.
When I was in high school, there were girls that talked about having kids together.
This former Gloucester high school student who didn't want to show her face says she thinks the so-called pact that has put Gloucester in the nation's spotlight is true, and she fully supports Principal Joe Sullivan's claims.
He's right in letting everyone know what's going on. It's an issue that needs to be addressed.
She's not alone in the counter to the officials' claim that no pact existed.
A number of the girls who came in to have pregnancy tests were glad to hear they tested positive, and to me, one of the more troubling points, really disappointed when their tests came back negative.
Even more troubling is that now, instead of the shame and embarrassment that pushed all involved into a cave, some of the pregnant teens actually believe they're celebrities.
There was definitely no pact. There was a group of girls who decided that they were already pregnant before they decided this.
Big difference.
Yeah, that they were gonna help each other with their kids so they could finish school and raise their kids together. You know, to do the right thing was their decision, not let's get pregnant, like, as a group.
Obviously, Ms. Oliver is too young to understand the sophistry in her words, where the pregnant teens, who weren't part of a pact, collectively decided to do the right thing. It would appear their wisdom came a little late. It was hard to watch this giddy young girl seemingly intoxicated by her newfound fame and self-importance. Incidentally, when contacted by a Fox News producer, another of the teen girls actually queried about getting paid for her interview.
It really was one of the big stories of the week, and we were talking yesterday to one of the bookers, Kim Agel, about why is it we haven't seen more of the family members and the friends of these pregnant girls on television. Well, apparently that has all changed today a little bit, right, Kim?
Yeah, it did a little bit, Trace. I spoke to a young couple, the husband-to-be, or the father-to-be,
right,
and the pregnant girl, and what they really wanted was cash. So, and then we don't do that at Fox.
How does that work? That's the whole thing, as I wonder, Kim. So we don't pay, just to make it clear, we do not pay for interviews at Fox News Channel in no way, shape, or form.
Gloucester officials are still undecided if they should attempt to charge those who, including a 24-year-old homeless man, impregnated the girls with statutory rape. As some of the sperm donors were under 16 themselves, it may be a tough one to prosecute. But some things are abundantly clear. Until getting pregnant at a young age is given the negative stigma it had years ago, we will have more Gloucesters, especially now that some of the girls who reportedly had self-esteem issues are now internationally cool. Until young parents can't pass the buck on to the rest of us to pay to support their children, more won't think twice about seeking that unconditional love at our expense. Until school districts stop circumventing parental authority right in front of our kids and giving them options of contraceptives and, in some states, abortions without parental knowledge or consent, kids will be sent the wrong message. Having sex is something we know you'll do, and if a pregnancy happens, come to us, not your parents. And if the girls end up with babies, it's only then where the parents are forced to assume the responsibility the teens never showed. Just a few years from freedom from these young people, their parents will be saddled with having to watch the baby while the girl goes to school, does her homework, goes out on Friday and Saturday night, or just doesn't feel like getting up to change and feed that baby at midnight, and 2 a.m., and 4 a.m. I'd be willing to bet not once did any of those girls talk about who was going to have to buy their babies formula or clothes or Huggies. Not once did any of these girls talk about who was going to pay for anything involving their babies because they themselves are children. They know nothing about paying bills, thus they aren't smart enough to be mothers. The boys shouldn't be let off the hook either. All those who knocked up these girls should be yanked out of school so they can get a job. These new families shouldn't be a burden to the existing families or society. Those young people made the decisions, and unfortunately for them, they need to pay for them. Hopefully, by sending that kind of message, teens would think twice before deciding, collectively or not, that having babies at age 16 or below is the right thing to do. Politicians and school administrators blaming the pregnancy on budget cuts or no child left behind is lame. The 16 or belows blaming a lack of jobs in the area or thus few future options is also lame. They'll soon realize just how fewer their options are now. Then again, we are talking about Massachusetts, where many believe it's our duty as residents to understand what self-esteem issues will lead teens to do. Maybe if they let parents be parents years ago, instead of wrenching that duty out of our hands, we wouldn't be talking about 17 sets of lives that statistically are destined for taxpayer dependency, maybe for another generation. Let's talk about their self-esteem issues 5 years from now.
And there are new developments tonight in that so-called pregnancy pact involving a group of Massachusetts high schoolers. The school's principal has been MIA until now. And brand new tonight, the pregnancy pact principal is standing by his story. Joseph Sullivan focused national attention on Gloucester High School in an interview with Time magazine. He told the reporter, quote, a group of girls who knew each other got pregnant on purpose. He said the girls were high-fiving each other when they found out they were pregnant. And he said one of the fathers is a 24-year-old homeless man. 17 girls at the school did, in fact, get pregnant this year, but this week the town's mayor said she couldn't confirm any other parts of the principal's story, and she threw the principal under the bus during a news conference. Take a listen.
He was foggy in his memory of how he heard about the information. When we pressed him for specifics about who told him, when was he told, his memory failed.
Well, now Mr. Sullivan responds. Rick Leventhal live tonight here in New York. And Rick, what do you know?
Well, Trace, the statement released by Principal Joseph Sullivan tonight is extremely detailed and very long. He emphatically denies his memory is fogged at all, blasting the local mayor for suggesting otherwise, restating for the first time since the story broke that a large group of girls at Gloucester High School did, in fact, get pregnant on purpose. Sullivan says the superintendent sent him an email warning not to talk to the reporter, but he didn't see it until after the interview. And when she asked whether distributing birth control at the school should have reduced pregnancies, he told her a significant number of the pregnancies, especially among the younger students, were the result of deliberate and intentional behavior. I honestly do not remember specifically using the word pact, he says, but I do specifically remember telling the reporter a number of the pregnancies were intentional and that the students within this group were friendly with each other. Sullivan also says my only direct source was the former nurse practitioner at the health center. My other sources are verbal staff reports and student staff chatter, all of which I have found to be very reliable in my experience as a principal. As for Mayor Carolyn Kirk, Sullivan says, since June 11th until this day, the mayor has not called me or had any conversation whatsoever with me concerning the Time magazine interview. The principal says he won't release the names of the girls, and he won't talk about this anymore. Trace.
Got a feeling we're about to hear from the mayor again. Rick Leventhal live for us in New York. Rick, thanks.